All right, all right, all right. Can you guys hear me? I hope you guys can hear me. My thing isn't turning on here. Hello, hello, hello. Oh, there we go. There we go. Hopefully, you guys could hear me the entire time. I hope everything is going good for all of you. Welcome in. This is episode number 167 of Calibrated Live with your host, Scott, of course. Scott, Aiden, whatever you guys like to call me. I am not late. That is a ridiculous accusation to make. I have never been late. I'm never going to be late. Please don't be throwing around accusations like that, okay? Welcome in, everybody from across the globe, across the country. If you're in America, I see hello from Arkansas, hello from Missouri. We make beef and timber. Nice. What's good? Calibrated with a C. Mr. Boston, you know better than that. Come on. Band. Let's see. Finally. Yeah, finally. Hello from Libya. Beautiful if you're actually in Libya. Hello from Saratov, Russia. Oi, bald man. Oi! Hungary. He arrives at exactly what he means to. Yes, yes, indeed. Saudi Arabia, Netherlands, beautiful. Arizona, Copenhagen, Ottawa, Canada, Toronto, Canada, beautiful. Got my Canadian boys in here. Montenegro, Bosnia, Montenegro, Nigeria. If you guys are actually from these places, it's really cool. It's really, really fucking cool. Sometimes I know you guys just throw up random things, but hello from Luxembourg, Dubai, Norway. That's really cool. If you guys are all seriously listening from those places, it is very cool. Hello from the UK. All right, guys, we can go ahead and start to just dip our toes into today. We can talk about what we got to talk about. 1 a.m. in Dubai. Thank you for listening, man. We have quite a bit to talk about today. There's a lot going on. I'm gonna just sort of go over some of the current negotiating positions that we've seen between the U.S. and Russia. Surprise, surprise, it went exactly like I said it was going to. Wasn't hard to see it coming that way, and it worked out exactly that way because obviously. So we are going to talk about that today. We have a good number of map changes to talk about. If you guys remember previously, the Russians had just broken through in the Pokrovsk direction. They had pushed north of Pokrovsk, north of Dobropila. We will look at this on a map in just a little bit, and had really created a very urgent situation. The Ukrainians had rotated in the 12th Azov Brigade and have more or less stabilized the upper outer area of that breakthrough, which makes sense tactically on a map. I mean, if you know what the conditions were, the Russians were moving through there with deep reconnaissance groups, so light infantry, moving quick, holding tree lines, stuff like that. But what it did was it forced Ukraine to rotate one of its best, most dependable brigades down to the Pokrovsk area to stabilize and to hold the city. And in doing so, have created a number of holes around the map, holes that we are going to examine today, holes that we are going to, that I'm going to show you and just show you what the Russians are doing while the Ukrainians focus on the Pokrovsk salient. And that doesn't mean that the Russians are done in the Pokrovsk salient by any means. They continue actually to expand that northern flanking maneuver. That that flank of the salient is growing for the Russians, becoming more stable. So the Russians are still pushing in this area. It's just the Ukrainians were forced to rotate in reserves that they were not planning to prevent the Russians from completely exploding out of the Pokrovsk front. So we're going to cover that. We got a lot to talk about, and we will just go ahead and start with the map. Head right over. Ba-ba. All right, we start in the Sumy region today. There has been continued Russian efforts in the Sumy region as of late. My map has more or less not changed. There's a lot of gray zone here. So unless there's something very particular that shows me, Russian or Ukrainian control, I will change that. Like here in Kindarivka. Excuse me real fast. Got something in the back of my throat. In Kindrivka, Ukrainian forces have recaptured half the village, and Drivka is more or less under Ukrainian control right now. So the Ukrainians have counterattacked in this area, and I don't do map updates just for very, very small geolocations that are 100 or 200 meters beyond this contact line. However, we did get geolocation of Russian forces deeper in the village of Yanakivka. They say that they have not yet entirely cleared the village and that the Ukrainians are still holding some of the houses in the southern end of the village, but the Russians are continuing to put effort in this direction. Not a big update, just a small little one right there. All right, nothing in the Volochansk region. Moving down to the Kupiansk area. So this is an area, exactly what I was talking about previously, where the Ukrainians have been forced to move so many, I would say, contingent forces. So forces that are moved to hold specific lines. Azov is a particularly good brigade at doing this. Sort of like the don't retreat or we'll shoot you in the back brigade. They bolster a line, they make it much stronger. They can turn a territorial defense unit into a much more eloquent fighting force and much more invested, I would say, if there's guys behind you that are going to shoot you if you run. And I'm not saying that's all they do. They also go in and they do fighting. They're very good fighters, but every military has these forces that will go and support weaker, less substantial units around the front. And that's what Azov is doing. So not to say that this area is in particular under Azov's protection. And since they left, we have seen advances here. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that there is a general manpower shortage across the entire Ukrainian front for the AFU, right? And when you're pulling units from one area or from another area, it just is going to create more holes. And if you can't move if you can't move that Azov brigade up to Kupiansk, instead you're moving it down here to Pokrovsk to hold the city, this is going to go by the wayside. You're going to start to see Russian advances in areas where you don't normally see them, which we are seeing. And you're going to see areas that have been very easily held by the Ukrainians now falling to the Russians without serious fights, without, so on and so forth. So moving in here, Russian forces have begun to close the Ukrainian bridgehead across the Oskil River, one that I have said the Ukrainians need to close for a long time now. There is no bridge in this area to cross, and with the Russian proximity, it'd probably be very difficult to get supply into this side of Kupiansk through this crossing. Most of the crossing is happening down here on pontoon bridges, and those pontoon bridges are getting struck daily. I see videos I think I saw 3 videos last week of different bridges, pontoon bridges and crossings across this Oskil River being struck and being damaged. Before we get into it a little bit deeper, if you guys are new here, please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. If you're old here, you should have already done that. And I'm disappointed in the ones that haven't, honestly. I'm not mad, just disappointed. All right. So, all right, without further ado, we'll get back into it here. So Russian forces have advanced to the outside of Petro Pavleka, which very much reduces the overall area that the Ukrainians have to operate in this salient, and this salient is getting tighter. Remember, it's only being supplied through temporary crossings, pontoon crossings down here, and Kupiansk is now in a very, very difficult position. This is an area where you should see the Russians quickly close up to the Oskil River, and then Kupiansk will be very difficult to hold with the Russians already across the river to the north. So this area is going to begin to move faster. It's going to become less of a problem for the Ukrainians, because it is a problem right now. And I know that might sound counterintuitive, but the Ukrainians are trying to sustain themselves here when they really should not be. When you're having incredible manpower issues and you're already spread too thin, holding extra salients across river crossings and stuff like that is just not a good idea. So again, while the Russians are advancing here, I'd say overall this is a better situation for the Ukrainians. If the Ukrainians were smart, they would just try to bolster Kupiansk and try to push the Russians out of northern Kupiansk as much as they can. However, the Russians do seem to be firmly established in the northern half of the city. So this will continue, and we should eventually see the Russians on this bank of the Oskil in Kupiansk and then spreading out along these roads north, south, and west. All right. Okay. Moving down. Russian forces have just made a small advance in between or south of Lazova right here. Nothing major, just the pocket sort of closed there. Moving down, nothing in the Oskil region near Borova. No serious advances in this direction as of late. Moving down to the Liman front here. We do have some important updates. Russian forces have crossed the small ponds in this area. I believe that this is the Jibets River, yes. So the Russians have crossed these ponds, which is technically the Jibets River. Obviously, these are used for agriculture and stuff like that, or industrial uses, but it looks like agriculture to me. Russian forces have crossed this area. This small fishing village is an area that was constantly in contention for the Russians. That is no longer the case, and have been geolocated in the northern edge of Zarshine, and have also been geolocated in the southern edge of Zarshine along this road here. An important update for a couple of reasons. Number one, it's significant because the Ukrainians have had such a good ability to hold a major thorn in the Russian side. The Russians have been right out here the entire time, and now that this is gone, the Russians have crossed. They are now on the highway that leads directly into Liman, which is bad news for the Ukrainians. The Russians are now 11 kilometers from, 11 or 12 kilometers, not 6, from Liman, which is important because of what Liman is and what it means for, Slavyansk and for Severk and everything like that. But they are also on the highway that travels south to Yampil, which again is very, very important for the entire Severk salient. If this road right here gets cut and the Ukrainians lose access to this road running into Severk, this entire pocket becomes much more difficult to keep supplied. There are other roads that lead up this direction, but as I've talked about multiple times, the way logistics works for any army is the more roads you have open, the better. The less chance you're going to get struck by a drone, the less chance you're going to be observed moving into a specific area, staging, and then can have a strike conducted on you, right? As your logistics field narrows, as the roads become more and more dangerous and you have limited paths, less drones are doing more work on fewer roads to more vehicles, if that makes any sense. That the target or the environment becomes target rich, and it makes controlling the flow of manpower, weapons, and supplies into any given salient or area much, much more controllable by the aggressor. So once the Russians get down in here into Yampil area, which we're going to talk about some of the advances in the Shubiansky forestry here, they should be able to cut off supply heading down from Liman, from the north, from Slavyansk, into the Seversk area, which will then force the Ukrainians to only bring supplies on the southern end of the Seversky Donetsk River right here, which you can see is sort of the divider, right? I'll kind of outline it here. There is this river that runs right through here, and this is what makes supply very difficult in this area, okay? So this river right here is the physical boundary that separates the Seversk front from the Liman front, and the forestry is to the north. So when you're looking at this, you can see that if the Russians cut this road, the Ukrainians will have to use the roads to the south, which lead into these areas from the west, and that means that the Russians no longer have to control this entire area with drones. They don't have to watch this area because all of the Ukrainian material will be coming through these open fields and these few roads down here to the south. So that's why this is so important. And as I've talked about, the overall situation up here in Kursk means that the Ukrainian supply into the Shevyansky forestry has now become much more limited, and the Russians are taking advantage of that. We previously saw a massive chunk of the forest come under Russian control. That has not changed. Deep State just updated their map with the Russians geolocated at this, or placed at this location, and that means that everything behind them in the forest has either been captured or is surrounded by Russian forces. Either way means the same thing on the map. And then just to the south here in this little stretch, this area was in the gray zone, and now it is under Russian control. So the entire northern flank of the Seversk pocket is now coming back into under Russian control, right? This is where they previously were. They were all the way out here in Liman. The Russians are going to push back out to this location, where they will probably stop before they begin to push in for the Battle of Sloviansk. Remember, Izum is up here to the north too. So if the Russians pause after Liman and want to push up for Izum, that is also a distinct possibility. All right. Here we can see a small Russian advance in Shrubyanka, not majorly important, but again, just shows general advances along the Seversk front. Very soon, if the Russians are able to cross this water barrier and cap all of this territory right here, north of the Seversky Donetsk River, they should be able to put a lot more pressure on this entire northern flank of Seversk, which, by the way, is the high ground. I will take us over to the topographical map so I can show you guys that. Hopefully you guys are all doing good. Sorry I haven't done an episode for some time. I was out of town, and then I was just not in the mood to do this at all. Sometimes I get very just sort of, I don't know, morose about getting on here and doing these. And so the last few days I was just like, I'm not going to do it until I feel like doing it, and it's going to make me happy. So I'm happy now. I'm on here talking to you guys. Hope you didn't miss me too much. All right. Topographical map. Here we go. Go up to Seversk. Yeah, here we go. So you can see that the Russians are currently, they almost have pushed out. Actually, they kind of have pushed out most of the high ground right here. There's still a small patch right here, which will put the Russians in a good position over Seversk. But remember, Seversk does have this high ground to the rear, so it will be hard to actually push the western side of the river that runs through Seversk. Seversk is divided by a river. The eastern half of the city will probably fall to the Russians pretty quick, and then that water barrier will make it much, much harder for the Russians to cross. All right. Out of the Seversk area now, down to the Chassar Yar front, Konstantinivka front, actually. Chassar Yar is now behind the Russians. To the south of Maaske, Russian forces have advanced. And remember, I specifically talked about this. I don't know, did I make a prediction for this? I meant to. No, no prediction there. No prediction there. Okay. So coming down here, we are going to make this prediction right now, just because I've talked about this a number of times. The Russians will follow this train line directly down to Azivka right here. I'm going to move this down into, holy forts. Holy forts. Where'd I put it? Where'd he go? Oh, no, he got lost. It's line 3. There it is. Okay. So here's this upcoming prediction. We'll go yellow, make it bigger. Boom. So there's the upcoming prediction. The Russians should follow this high ground, follow the railway line to Azivka, and then get behind Konstantinivka. Okay. So not a major update, just another small update to the south of Azivka there. Moving down to the Stepochke, Klishchevka, Bilohora area, we do have a significant Russian advance. Russian forces have closed the pocket west of the canal here near Klishchevka. This is quite a big deal. This area has been a holdout for quite some time. The Ukrainians are still maintaining positions in some of the fortifications right here, south of Pertinice, Perdicini. So there are some fortifications in these fields right here, which the Ukrainians do control. Russian forces have advanced and captured the majority of this village, with some reports of Russians entering into Konstantinivka itself. Some say that they advanced along these dachas in the northern part through this forested area into the city. However, we do not have confirmation of that at this time. So the map is just being held basically a kilometer back from the city. But this is a big advance, and this puts the Russians exactly where we had talked about for this other upcoming prediction. Let's see. Boom, right there. Exactly where I had lined it up, right? So the Russians are almost now completed with this prediction. I will be removing this prediction shortly after this section under this reservoir closes up. And as we can see over here, the village of Novospassky has been practically entirely captured. I guess this might still count as Novospassky. I don't know. This town is extremely long. It starts down here and then goes up here, or it might be Sherbanivka. I don't know how the townships work here. I can't tell which part this is a part of. I think it's Novospassky, but I'm not sure. Either way, Russian forces have advanced through the bottom end of this pocket, and most importantly have captured this entrenched line right here. You can see it dug into the earth. This fortified line, which is just south of Kelbenbik, has been captured, and now the Ukrainians have almost no room to operate south of this reservoir. How is there even a pocket south of the reservoir? The Ukrainians are literally just sitting in fields and a tiny road supplying them, which the Russians overlook. It makes no sense. Hey, friend. Welcome to the Russo-Ukraine War. This is a situation I've been dealing with for 7 battles probably through this point, and probably 20 different salients and encirclements that I've seen where I've told myself the exact same thing. How the fuck are the Ukrainians supplying themselves through one little road or one field? And how are they maintaining these positions? And how? It's a good question. And while it makes no tactical sense, the Ukrainians continue to do it. And they're actually kind of good at maintaining salience. It's not really a good talent to have. But if you're going to be stuck in a salient, being able to maintain it properly is a decent attribute to have. But you're absolutely right. They are running logistics, and this map might not be 100% concrete. Like, I'm not saying that the Russians have positions here and they're just looking out on the Ukrainians coming down the road, right? That's not realistic because they're going to be getting shot at. They're going to be getting droned and everything like that. This just shows where the Russians are and how the overall map is looking in terms of freedom of movement and stuff like that. So, like I said, that doesn't mean that there's a Russian unit that's just shooting at cars that are moving down this road, right? That's not what that means. It means that Russians have been geolocated in here. They might be in a foxhole hiding. The Ukrainians still have the ability to move stuff down here. Yes, they'll take losses. They'll lose vehicles along this road. We've seen it time and time again. But there's not a ton of Ukrainian troops in this area. If you look over here, you can see that this part of the salient is being maintained by a defensive line. So the Ukrainians are holding in that defensive line. And then over here, there are a bunch of fortifications in this area. There's a fortification right here that isn't shown on the map. And then there was this fortification to the south. So they were able to keep the pressure off. But you're making a very good point. There is no reason for the Ukrainians to stay here. They should leave. They are taking unnecessary losses attempting to hold this. And as you can see, they're not even succeeding because the pocket is still closing. So, it's a good question. I've had that question many a time myself, friend. Thank you. Who is your NFL team? P.S. Go Hawks. Go Hawks. Who the fuck is the Hawks? I might be tripping, but I don't think the NFL has a Hawks football team. They have the Eagles, they have the Falcons, the Ravens. I might be tripping, but I don't think I'm a Chiefs fan. Been a Chiefs fan my entire life. Family's in Kansas, so I've been a Chiefs fan through thick and thin. Now is the thick part, I guess. But I don't know who the Hawks are. I would be interested to know who that is. Kursk falling by Lehman is more significant for the position of the AFU than the double pupilla axis. Losing Le Mans would be unthinkable even last year. I agree. Oh, the Seahawks. Gotcha. Roger Dodger. I forgot that was a team. I just always call them Seattle. I never call them the Seahawks. It's always just Seattle. Gotcha. Good stuff. I think he always does answer to YouTube guys. No, I just check the chat sometimes. If people do super chats, I always respond to those. Like if you're going to pay money to talk to me, which thank you guys so much for your support. It's awesome. I love it. It honestly is such an ego boost too. And I know that's really shitty to say, but it is. Like you guys being on here and like asking me questions in this way is so rewarding for me personally. That I love doing it. And no, I'll answer anybody's questions. It's just those people get priority because obviously they get priority. They keep the show afloat. But thank you all. Yeah, Seahawks are great. I'm a huge DK Metcalf fan. So I've liked DK since he was drafted, and now he's with Pittsburgh, which is whatever. But that's why I like watching Seattle, because of DK. All right. Okay, now we're going to move to the focus of the front, right? This is the area where the Ukrainians and Russians are fighting the hardest. This is where the most movement is happening. And this is where at least the entire Ukrainian information space is focused. I haven't heard anybody talking about Southwest Donetsk, where things are also happening. I haven't heard anybody talk about the forest other than some of the really good pro-Ukrainian accounts like Playfra or something like that is his name. I've only ever read it, so. But he's talking about Shubiansky Forestry, which is very important. And as you talked about, Le Mans, very important. Torske and Zasharin, very important. Obviously, the Konstantinivka situation is developing rapidly. Not hearing a lot of talk about that from the Ukrainian side. But the pro-Ukrainian information space is talking specifically about their successes. So we'll talk about their successes right now. To the north, if you guys remember, this was the Russian breakthrough. And I want to be very, very clear. When the Russians were up this far north, they were operating in a DRG fashion. This was not an armored assault. This was not thousands of Russians flooding into the area and taking control. No, it was, I'm going to just put pins down. There's like, boom, 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 boom. I'll delete these in just a second, but just so you guys can kind of see what I'm talking about. Like this is more the situation. You had groups of 2, 3, 4 guys sort of pushing out and just expanding into the zone because the Ukrainians didn't have the resources to hold them in, right? So that's more or less what this entire thing was. And that doesn't mean that it wasn't a operation that was stifled by Ukrainian opposition. It doesn't mean that this was a it doesn't mean that the Russians don't want to maintain this area. Of course they would. They would have loved to have held this and put immense pressure on Pavleka and stuff like that. But what it is it's not some crippling battlefield loss for the Russians. That's not what this is at all. The Russians were forced back by the Ukrainian rotation. But look how far away this is from any Russian staging and logistics, right? I mean, you have a few of these little towns that have been mostly destroyed, like little villages, but there's no real substantial area for the Russians to stage and push out of. Exactly the same conversation we were having down here in Udachny in this area. Remember I said it is so easy for the Ukrainians to defend this area, coming out of Dobopila, coming out of Pokrovsk, coming out of Mazova. This area right here is the hardest for the Russians to move through right now, just because they are experiencing a long logistics line from Seledove, or perhaps Andrivka and Kharkove down here. I don't know if they're running supplies from the south or from the west. But this area, you're not going to see a ton of Russian movement just because the Ukrainians have a tactical battlefield advantage just in this small little section right here, right? Same thing applies up here. Once the Russians start getting, how far? I mean, they're 20 kilometers from this, or 20 miles from this ring road down here. So supply probably comes through this area to some degree. There might be some small staging in this area, but again, there's just no major urban area to just sit in and just allow yourself to base out of, basically. Like there's no Kharkove industrial plant. There's no Bakhmut salt mines or Soledar salt mines. There's none of that. There's none of that happening here. So the Russians in this area were pushed back because they did not fully control all of this area. They did not dig in. They were not resupplying and reinforcing this entire area. The Russians were forced back from the top edge of this. But again, even the results of the counteroffensive seem lackluster to what has been accomplished. Remember, if you remember, the breakout started from Pankivka down here. So they still control a dominant area that they did not control before that breakthrough happened. And just talking about the new advances we've seen since this has happened, moving down here, Russian forces have captured Volodymyr and have pushed up into Shakove. So this is a pretty big deal. They're also just on the outside of Sofivka, and that means that this entire northern flank of Pokrovsk is going to get much wider and much more stable for the Russians. This is very, very bad news for the Ukrainians. You do not want your northern flank above a salient developing well like this. Also, what this means, if the Russians are able to push up into Donetsk and Kursk over here, these two, now you're developing problems for the Konstantinivka, Druskivka, Oleksevo, Druskivka line right here. So these three settlements, right? These three big ones. Now you're creating logistics problems by pushing up on this side. So I don't know what the whole there's a lot of cope going on right now. There's a ton of cope, and I've just sort of been staying out of it because I'm so tired of arguing the same points with the same people over and over and over again, and just not having anybody become familiar with patterns. Like there seems to be zero pattern recognition, which is just impossible for me to understand. All I do is focus on pattern recognition. So arguments about this don't make sense, but is this worth this? This forest is a very strong position. Is it worth losing this forest to come down and push the Russians back from the road this much? Maybe. I mean, I'm not on the ground. I don't know the overall tactical situation, and I'm not saying that the Ukrainians necessarily even have the choice, right? Their backs are up against the wall. The only option they have, the options they have were let the Russians run wild back here, which is not a good idea, or rotate Azov in and try to hold this the best that they can, right? They chose the option which saves the front line. But in doing so, you're exposing the Konstantinivka front line, the Seversk front line, the Liman front line, and the Kupiansk front line. And we're not even south of Pokrovsk yet, where the Russians are pushing out the Vovocha line, and they're pushing out into Zaporozhye and Nepetros over here. So there's a lot going on, right? And this is what the Ukrainians did. This is what they got done with their rotation and their push. And I don't think that it's enough. I think that the Azov also took a lot of losses in pushing the Russians back out. I saw multiple hits on vehicles that were carrying groups of men, vehicles that had men mounted on top of them getting struck by FPVs. So the human casualties here are not low for the Ukrainians. This came at a cost. And it's not also the losses. There were losses for the Russians as well. I'm not trying to make it one-sided at all. The thing is the Russians can afford to take losses. The Ukrainians cannot afford to take losses. That's the difference. And that's why I talk about it from the perspective that I do. The Russians can afford to fire 100 missiles a month. The Ukrainians cannot afford to fire 100 missiles a month. So the approach to how you're talking about their situations is going to be definitely different. But yeah, so I don't think that this is particularly worth it. I don't think that they've done enough. It doesn't mean that they're necessarily done, but it does seem that the front has stabilized. The Russians are continuing to advance in other directions and in other areas, including down into Donetsk itself. Here we can see that Chervony Liman has been captured by the Russians. The Russians have also entered this industrial zone just south of the large industrial mound, and they have pushed into the northern edge of Donetsk and likely control portions of this fortification across the railway. There are active battles going all along this railway, and this small train station of Dorozhezhine might have been recaptured by the Ukrainians right here. So this is the part of the front line that's kind of back and forth right now. It might be a little bit more gray than I have it shown, but until I have concrete information, my map doesn't get updated. So, okay, so that's Pokrovsk. Oh, and then down here, Russian forces there. Since I have not seen additional DRG footage from this area, I have removed the Russian control. As soon as we get more footage of the Russians back in, I will just re-update it. But I'm trying to give the most realistic presentation of the map, and we haven't seen any Russian movement in this part of the city for over a week now, so I just removed it. Okay, everybody doing good? Waiting for Grand Kharkov Offensive 2 on August 28th, 1600 or 16,000 more AFU will be fed. We've been hearing a lot of rumors that the Ukrainians might try to go on the offensive in the Bryansk region, potentially in the Kharkov region. I don't really know how that's going to work out. It's going to be much smaller than the Kursk operation. So again, it doesn't seem like the smartest idea to me, but they're going to do what they're going to do. Would not doubt that in the slightest. Personally, I think this ends in a South Vietnam scenario. Trump flip-flops, but we'll take the off-ramp in the end to save face. I think we'll have helicopters leaving Saigon moments. No, I don't think so. I think that the U.S. is digging its feet in. I think that this was the plan all along. You might see a Saigon moment eventually, but I don't think it's going to be in the exact way that you're referring to. I think that this is going to be a much slower process. I think that you're going to see the Ukrainian economy bolstered for way longer than it should be. I mean, what you're saying is probably right, and it's probably what we should do. We should take the off-ramp. We should extricate ourselves from this conflict, but we don't want to. Why would we start a conflict and then just extricate ourselves from it? Like, that doesn't make sense. And yes, we did start this conflict. We overthrew the Ukrainian government in 2014, started pumping intelligence, arms, started training all of their manpower, reorganizing their entire military, getting it ready for this exact scenario. So, Russia might have crossed the border, but in my opinion, they didn't really start the war. And if the U.S. starts it, funds it, arms it, and maintains it for 4 years, it's their war, and they want it clearly. However, we are reaching the point where we are getting to embarrassment territory. So I do think that you are not wrong in that the public appearance of the Trump administration will be an off ramp. I'm done with Ukraine, blah, blah, blah. They can settle it, this, that, or the other. Bullshit. That's not real. That's Trump doing Trump shit. And I can't believe people are falling for it still. I'm not saying you are, but people are. People genuinely think Trump is getting frustrated that he can't make peace between Ukraine and Russia, which is a crock of shit. Because when Putin came to Alaska last week, they seemed to have a good talk. They seemed to have decent understandings about what was going on. And then a day later, all of the European leaders and Zelensky arrive in Europe or in America. And then Trump just is saying completely opposite shit that has no basis in reality and will not serve to end the conflict at all. So either he's the biggest fucking moron you've ever seen in your entire life, which I doubt, right? I don't think that that's the case. Or the U.S. wants this war to continue, and it's exactly what's happening. It's going to continue. And guess what? Guess who just bought $1.5 billion worth of U.S. arms deal or arms contracts for supply to Ukraine? Oh, that's right. Europe did, right? There you go. So that's the situation. We don't want the war to end. We want it to continue. It's the best goddamn money we've ever spent. Lindsey Graham told you guys straight up to your faces 2 years ago. He was sitting in Kiev and he said, killing Russians, or sitting in Brussels or somewhere, killing Russians is the best money the U.S. has ever spent. Allowing Ukrainians to die to kill Russians, keeping Russia bogged down in Ukraine, overthrowing Syria because Russia doesn't have the bandwidth to save it, overthrowing the axis of resistance because Russia doesn't have the bandwidth to support it, right? Overthrowing Iran eventually. That's coming. If you guys don't think that Iran is going to get struck again, fucking recognize some patterns, boys. It's coming. Venezuela going to get knocked off, or they're going to try at least, right? And Venezuela is very alone. So that there is very real things going on, and they're none of what any American voted for, I don't think. So no, we don't want the war to end. We don't want an off ramp. We're going to make public this or that and say we're taking off ramps, but no, there's no off ramp for this. We're trapped. We're stuck. This is geostrategic. Europe is fucked if this doesn't go right. And if Europe's fucked, the whole NATO alliance is fucked. If the whole NATO alliance is fucked, the U.S. sphere of influence shrinks, right? We want to control the Middle East. We want to control Europe. We want to control Southeast Asia. We want to control global trade. We want to control everything. That's what hegemonies do. That's what empires do. So we might have a Saigon moment, but again, just like South Vietnam, South Vietnam, we talk about it like it's such a huge loss. And it was, I mean, from a purist point of view, looking at the Vietnam War was a loss for America, right? But if you're looking at it from the Cold War perspective, it forced the Soviet Union to expend tremendous resources in Southeast Asia over almost nothing. Resources that the U.S. had to expend, like we had it available to expend, and the Soviets were trying to keep up with us. Same thing happened with the space race. Same thing happened with all of this. The Russians beat us in the space race, right? Other than to the moon, they beat us into space. They had far better missile technology and stuff like that. But who won? Right? Ukraine might be looking good for Russia right now. It might be looking excellent for Russia right now, right? I'm not saying it is, but if the Russians were pushing through and lines were collapsing, it might look really good. But that doesn't mean that winning in Ukraine means you win against the United States. Winning in Ukraine means that you could have a huge financial burden and a massive terrorist problem for the next goddamn 30 years until you extricate yourself from Ukraine, right? Like, you don't know what's coming in the future. You don't know what's going to happen. So I'd be very cautious in saying that we're reaching the point where there's going to be this tremendous U.S. withdrawal and they're going to leave and it's going to be a massive loss for the United States. I don't think that that's the case. I think that this has already been a win for the United States. The position that the United States was in before this was not very good. It's still not great, but we are at least doing the, I would almost call it necessary evil in maintaining the hegemony, right? We are going to war when we need to go to war. We are overextending our enemies when we can overextend them. And we are fighting and biting to hold on to what we have. So that's sort of the lens that you have to perceive all of this through. Sorry, that was kind of long. To the last Ukrainian isn't a meme to the U.S. government. No, it is not. It is not a meme, and we do not give a rat's fucking ass about Ukrainians. It's very sad. But, all right, on the Vovocha line here in southern Donetsk, guys, right up against Nepetros Oblast, Russian forces have pushed up along the river here north of Novokatske and have basically leveled the front along the river. Over here, Russian forces have made a western advance across almost the entire line, reaching the village of Alexanderhad and Andrivka Klevetsove. Now, these two villages I did have as marked, as we did get geolocations in this area, but it does appear that in this area, the Ukrainians are also counterattacking and trying to maintain the defensive line just on this side of the Vovocha River, which, again, I don't see as being very beneficial to the Ukrainians, but we're here. And so they're going to continue counterattacking. And by the way, the one thing that the Russians want more than anything else is for the Ukrainians to attack them. So when we're talking about Kursk 2.0, Electric Boogaloo, or Kharkov 2.0, or Bryansk 1.0, Ukrainian incursions, that's a good thing. That's exactly what the Russians want. Remember what happened the last time the Ukrainians went into Kursk? I'm pretty sure we saw this entire flank of southern Pokrovsk right here fall. Opened up the door to Kakove, opened up all of this to be captured. So yeah, go ahead, go into Kursk and see what happens. It's not going to work out the way you want it to, go into Bryansk or whatever. It's not going to work out the way that the Ukrainians want it to. All right, moving down into the Nepetrovsk region. Russian forces have advanced out of the Zaporozhye region into the Nepetrovsk region and have captured Novohirivka here. So again, not a major update, but this defensive line is being kind of capitulated down here in the south, which will then open up the Russians to push up to the north. And if we go down to my predictions, we are very close to seeing the end of... oh, did I delete it? I might have deleted it. No. I had a prediction where the Russians were going to push up to this area. Wait, that's upcoming predictions. Hold on. Boom! Still here. We'll change the color, though. Boom! Exactly as I called it. The Russians will continue until they reach the Vovocha River line here and this giant forested area. All right. All right. Okay, and then just to the south, again, just a sort of like the entire front line here is just moving west. Russian forces have advanced just to the north of Holivske, which is again in the Zaporozhye region and part of my conversation of the Russians pushing towards the village of Polier. They are going to have to capture up to Yusipnivka here and then use the highway to get on the backside of Polier. All right, guys. Done with updates. Holy shit, that only took 50 fucking minutes. I get what you're saying. I'm pointing out it's a sunk cost fallacy if the U.S. stays in publicly to the last point Ukraine falls. Trump is going to take him out. Oh yeah, for sure. Oh yeah, I think he's going to take a massive L anyway. I think that that's unavoidable at this point. I think that that Trump is going to take that L. But I do believe that the L is not the important part. Again, this I hate to be this guy, but the public image does not fucking matter at all. It doesn't matter at all. It doesn't matter to the people pretending that it matters, and it doesn't matter to the people observing it. It does not fucking matter. So I would be taking L's all day as a president. I would have the lowest approval rating ever. Who gives a shit? Especially if you're not up for second election or re-election. Who gives a fuck? You're getting things done, right? So if Ukraine completely self implodes on itself and I have to put that on my resume, oh well. Are people going to really remember me for that? Probably not. Does anybody really remember? Does anybody blame the president who failed in Vietnam for the failing of Vietnam? It was 3 presidents before him. Biden is just as much of a part of this as Trump is. Trump just inherited a bad situation. So I do agree with you. I think that you're right. It is going to be an L, and I think that it is sunk cost fallacy, and I think that the U.S. is looking for an off-ramp, and they do want an off-ramp, but it's not a real off-ramp. It's just a public off-ramp where underneath they're still going to be doing the exact same thing, and they should still be on the hook for the failure, even if they're not later on. So yes, I agree with you. So Venezuela, another Iraq forever war, bombing the crap out of Venezuela. Of course it's for oil and not because of Murdo. Well, yeah, Murdo wasn't a problem a year ago. Biden was the one calling him the president of Venezuela after months and months or years and years of calling Juan Guaido the president in exile. I mean, it's ridiculous. Yes, it's about oil. Yes, it's about U.S. geostrategic positioning. They are the regime on this hemisphere that we can take out. That's what Venezuela is. So, yeah, I don't know if it'll be a forever war, but if Avatar is anything to go off of, Venezuela was some mean bush. So we got to be careful down there. The Venezuela will be the war where I sign up and I go for no good reason. I'll be totally against it and everything, but that'll be the one that I'll be in for plot. I approve of the calibrated administration regardless of the polling. Yeah, we don't even show the polls. We don't take polls. We don't give a fuck. We literally don't care. You guys voted us in, and we told you we weren't going to do any of the things we promised we were going to do. You guys don't want more wars? Well, we're just going to barely arm Ukraine and genocide Gaza and strike Yemen and bomb Iran. We're just going to barely do that stuff, even though you guys voted for no wars. Come on. It's all just jokes. This is a simulation, guys. We're just playing Sims over here. It's not even real. Just relax. When do you believe that Donetsk Oblast will be fully liberated by the Russian army? I don't know, man. I don't know. It's such a toss-up because the Russians don't appear to be in any significant rush. So if they were pushing harder, I would say less than a year probably until that happens. But with the Russian position, I mean, I don't know. It could be a while, honestly, because the goal is not the Donbass, right? The goal is not to get Ukrainians out of Donetsk. I mean, that might be the end goal, but that's not the current goal in the Russian military. It's attrition still. It's still just attrition. So you're not seeing massive armored pushes. You're not seeing it's massive staging for heavy advances. You're just seeing this. That's all it is. And every time that weight comes down on Ukraine, every time that Russian weight comes down on Ukraine, they get weaker and weaker and weaker, and they're getting smaller and pushed in. And it's just that's what the Russians are doing. So yeah, why go to Venezuela? I just said for the plot, dude. All right. Let's talk about negotiations. So I was very clear on why I said I was very clear when I said that there was not going to be any negotiated settlement to this. The pro-Russian space was fucking crying and dooming and, oh my God, Putin's going to sell out the Russians and this and that and everything else. I said, Putin doesn't have any fucking say. What are you guys talking about? Putin is just as, I have just as much pull as Putin does in these negotiations, right? These aren't negotiations. It's theater. The U.S. is putting on a show, trying to show that they're attempting to solve the war that they're propagating, and acting like they don't have the ability to make Zelensky do what they want him to do, acting like Europe isn't their vassal under their fucking thumb, acting like we don't blow up energy infrastructure of our allies whenever we want to, acting like we don't overthrow governments of our allies when we don't like the positions that they're taking and stuff like that. It's just it's ridiculous, and it's so aggravating to sit here and be talked at like you're an actual special needs student in a classroom. Like you have no ability to comprehend what's happening, and they have to fully explain everything to you because you're just that stupid. And you're sitting there and you're going, so let me get this right. You don't want the war. You don't want the war to continue. You want there to be a negotiated settlement. The Russian position is manageable for sure, especially because the Russians still made some concessions when they came to Alaska. They didn't demand that the Ukrainians leave Zaporozhye and Kherson City, which is the annexed parts of those regions. They said they would freeze the front line on those areas if the Ukrainians left the Donbass. The Ukrainians did not turn that down. What ends up happening? The next day, the Ukrainians start showing off their Flamingo long-range cruise missile with 3,000 kilometers, which, by the way, if you guys have seen this thing, it's a fucking tank. It's like 13 meters long. It has an additional engine on top for thrust. It is a monster of a missile, dude. I don't know what the radar signature on that thing is, but it must be just unbelievable. So, you know, they unveil this new deep strike weapon, and then you have Trump coming out and saying things like, puts out a tweet on social, or a post on social, True Social, where he goes, the Ukrainians have never been able to strike Russia where it hurts, and they can never win a war. It's like being a great football team, but only ever having a great defense. Which, by the fucking way, the Patriots won like 7 Super Bowls with just defense. So don't want to hear about that. Second off, it's funny how he's talking about it like it's sport. It's oh yeah, all those Ukrainians getting absolutely mangled and torn apart. Good defense. Like, what the fuck is that? So just if you're looking for some of the perspective of the people making decisions, it's a game. It's good defense. It's good offense. It's giving them what they need so they can get things done. That's what this is. It's not emotional. It's not evil. It's just what it is. And so you know, the Russian position was manageable in Alaska, and after the Europeans and Ukrainians came to America, the U.S. administration's position flipped upside down immediately compared to what it was. I don't know what the Europeans told Trump. I don't know if they even told him anything. Again, when it's all theater, you never know what to actually believe, because there are kernels of truth dropped in and out of the entire place. But when it's all mixed up with bullshit and nonsense, it's all useless and it doesn't matter, right? So what was the outcome? This is what we have to do. We just need to step back and look at results. What did I say was going to happen? What did I specifically say was going to happen? Putin was going to go. He was going to offer something. Trump was going to say good things, and it was going to be an ego-stroking session for Trump, right? Which it was. It's exactly what it was. And then what did I say? Then when it comes down to it, the Europeans are going to come over, Zelensky's going to come over, and either they're going to make it impossible, or they're going to convince Trump to go back on any sort of agreement, any sort of talks that were had at all, right? Again, don't even know if talks were had in earnest because theater. But it doesn't matter because the end result was exactly what we thought it was going to be, and it didn't miss a fucking beat. It didn't miss a beat. And now Zelensky is trying to blame Putin for not wanting peace, even though he literally showed the terms for peace, demanding the ceasefire before anything can happen, which is bullshit. And then immediately upon the ceasefire, you have NATO, the US, and individual European countries discussing security guarantees for Western troops to enter Ukraine upon the cessation of hostilities. I don't know what else I can fucking possibly say at this point. This is all I've been talking about the entire time. It went exactly as I thought it was going to, and I'm so sick and fucking tired of covering this absolute dog shit nonsense 24/7. Negotiations are so fucking stupid, and I'm so fucking tired of it. I'm full tilted on this because it's been like 3 years of just this bullshit, want to negotiate but never actually going to negotiate, and it wastes weeks of time. Literally weeks of time are just gone because of, oh, we're going to give them 2 weeks to decide on this or 2 weeks to decide on that. Fucking, can we just cut it? What's with the bullshit? Like, why? Why do we have to pretend? You are all fucking killing each other. You're dropping bombs on each other. Why can't we just have a war, like, gentlemen? Why do we have to do this shit? Like, I don't get it. Nobody wants it. That's the thing, is if everybody wanted it, sure, let's have negotiations. Let's have talks. Let's settle this. Let's get it done. This doesn't need to be happening. But every side wants it. And the Russians want it too. And this is another thing. Putin, why are you going and entertaining this? The public opinion does not fucking matter at all. It has to be clear by this point that public opinion does not fucking matter. It doesn't matter to the US administration. It doesn't matter to Europeans. It doesn't matter to the Russians. It doesn't. The Russians want the war to continue. You know how many people are making absolute bank off of this war? All of them. All of them. Wars are just times of opportunity. So the Russians, just as much as the United States, want the war to continue. They want to win it, but they want the war to continue. People are making money. Everybody's employed. This is not going to end because of feelings and emotions and because public opinion and whatever. It's just, that's not going to happen. So, yeah, yep. It's like throwing up in your mouth, and then you just keep throwing up in your mouth, but your mouth is sewed shut so it doesn't go anywhere. So throw up is just making you throw. That's how I feel about negotiations right now. It's just I'm regurgitating the same vile throw up again and again in my mouth, and it's like coming out my nose a little bit because there's nowhere to go. That's how I feel about this shit. I've been so mad on my Telegram too. I've been like spouting off about it. This pissed me off, dude. Pissing me off. All right, guys. That's where I think I'm done for today. It has been 1 hour and 3 minutes. Oh, boys, it has been a long one. It's been a tough one. It's been a long one. But we made it. Can you stop vaping? Vaping, it's bad for you. I only vape during my live streams, actually, because it gets my brain on a on a wire. Part of the issue I have when I talk is I talk really, 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 really fast, and I can't always get the words out the way I want them to. But when I hit a little bit of nicotine, my brain fires up, and I'm able to get through these a little bit better. So I'm trying to do it for you guys. This is for you. I don't do this for me. You guys forced me to do that. Do a green screen with a funny background. Okay, on the next one. On the next one, I'll have a green screen. I'll get a green screen up. All right, guys. 1 hour and 4 minutes. Thank you so much. This has been episode 167 of Calibrated Live. Thank you all. Thank you to all of you who subscribed. Thank you to all of my consistent listeners who are in here regularly, who like, comment, and share my live streams. I appreciate you guys so much. I love this community. It is fantastic to be back in town and back in a mental position where I feel like I actually want to do these. So we are back. I will be doing a small live stream tomorrow, not with updates or anything. I'll just be getting on here and talking. So if you guys want to come in and join me for that, I would think I'll be doing that at 12 p.m. tomorrow, my time, which is 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So be in here for that. It'll just be a chat session. We'll just be doing this sort of stuff. I might rage a little bit or something like that. So be safe, take care, and enjoy your weekend, all of you. I love you guys.